Hi, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. I just have been reflecting on some really interesting material on Venus from the point of view of the descent of Inanna. Inanna is also Ishtar. Um, Inanna comes from the Sumerian times, Sumerian language, and Ishtar comes from a city called Akkad in Mesopotamia, Babylonian times, or Babylonian astrology. And because Venus is currently an evening star, um, and will become the morning star in March next year, the morning star in Aries as per tropical zodiac, but it'll be in Pisces in the Babylonian zodiac. There's just some really interesting things to consider, particularly because of what's been happening this year. I'm mixing systems now, which I love doing because you get so much more out of it when you do. Earlier this year, I recently did a video where I spoke about the conjunction between Venus and Pluto that began in February. And I've also spoken about the alignment that's come up. It's still currently active to some extent, except Lilith, goddess Lilith, has moved away. But there was a very important lineup with the South Node in Libra, Venus in Libra, Lilith in Libra, Juno in Libra. So there's 2024, I think, has been quite a paramount year from the point of view of this divine deity we know as Venus for the most part, who is actually Ishtar, who is Inanna, who corresponds to many other deities as well, particularly when she is transitioning from a morning star to an evening star or an evening star to a morning star. So when she goes through her transition phase, which equates to different periods of time in length, from morning star to evening star, and then from evening star to morning star, those periods are shorter and longer depending on where she's transitioning from. In any case, when she is transitioning, she is going through that process of transformation, right? And we typically know about that process and that journey as it being referenced to the story of Inanna's descent through the seven gates. There's so many complexities involved in these teachings and these stories. And frankly speaking, I could speak about this for infinity and I wouldn't cover it all. There is just so much. And every time I pick up something, an article or one of my books, or, just consider more about these stories and these themes relative to the backdrop of what's happening in the sky at the moment, I'm always shown and given new little jewels and diamonds of information. So the other thing that I want to bring into this as well is that transiting Mars has just ingressed into Cancer. And transiting Mars will have quite an interesting journey through Cancer over the next 2 months. Now, Cancer is its sign of fall, as it is understood in traditional astrology. In other words, Cancer is not the strongest sign for Mars. On the other hand, there are some good things about it as well. It's always, I think it's always a balancing act when you're trying to assess things. I think it's very, very crucial that we keep an open mind and that we allow the space, for the various nuances and differences, and things are not black and white. They never are. So in Cancer, yes, it's in its full position. And it does make Mars very, very sensitive, very the unconscious component of Cancer is triggered, by Mars. Mars is it's a difficult planet. It's a malefic, right? So it angers whatever it kind of touches, if you like. So it's not an easy placement. However, what we need to also consider in this story, and again, it's quite complex because there's a few different layers. This Mars in Cancer, at the end of its cycle in Cancer, which will be in November, will form an opposition to Pluto, okay? Because Pluto has now retrograded back into Capricorn, right? For this final dance, if you like. And this is obviously an incredibly momentous time, for the world, for us individually, with Capricorn completing Pluto completing the Capricorn journey, because we will not see that for another 248 years. So this cycle between Mars and Pluto, where they will form an opposition in November, right at the end of Mars being at the 29th degree of Cancer, and Pluto will be 29. So those are anaretic degrees. They're very critical for evolutionary shifts and changes and things finishing and completing. Before that, Mars will form a T-square with the Sun in Libra and Chiron in Aries. And where this cycle began with Mars-Pluto, once again, was in February of 2024. Because basically in February 2024, we had a Pluto-Mars-Venus triple conjunction, right? Like a hugely important cycle relative to the masculine and feminine principles and energies and archetypes, cosmologically speaking, So this cycle now with Mars and Pluto is a backstory from what began in February, okay? The cycle of Venus being conjunct the South Node, activating the solar eclipse, which is coming up in Libra in October. She too was part of that conjunction back in February. So there's a lot of layers that are interwoven together that all speak to Mars' lower will, if you like, our drives and desires and passions and motivations and energy and strength and ability to fight for what we love, for what we believe in, and so forth, our personal desires. But when we bring Pluto into the story, which we must, because Mars is going to form an opposition to Pluto, then we are talking about Pluto, the soul, or if you don't like the word soul, or if you don't think Pluto corresponds to the soul, that's fine. In Jeffrey Wolf Green's work, which I've studied quite extensively, Pluto corresponds to the soul, and I'm very content with that understanding. So if you don't like the word soul or whatever, just understand that Pluto ultimately equates to our ultimate highest will, right? The highest possible will of power that we have, okay? That comes from a more conscious position, you could say, a more empowered position, right? So Pluto and Mars forming this opposition is an opposition is like a full moon, which means that things are illuminated. What's going to be illuminated? Well, whatever began in February with this triple conjunction, Venus, Mars, Pluto, we've got Venus showing up in different ways as an evening star, forming this conjunction to the South Node in Libra with Juno and Lilith, activating the solar eclipse, which is coming up in Libra in October. And that particular Saras cycle, which I've mentioned a few times already, is a very, very difficult cycle of family of eclipses, specifically to do with relationships. Lilith in the mix with the South Node is a very difficult figure as well. It doesn't mean that we can't work through things, or that we can't heal things, or that we can't grow and become more conscious. We always can, no matter what shows up. But depending on what shows up, will also color the field of what we are working with, right? So we've got all these different layers going on at the moment. And what I want to bring up here is that Venus is an evening star at the moment, right? And she is around about halfway through her cycle, right, of when she transitioned into evening star, which was in June this year in the sign of Gemini in the tropical zodiac. So she's kind of halfway, right? And before she became an evening star, She was a morning star. She was the Leo morning star that was active or activated in August of 2023. Okay. So we had the Leo morning star, which was really wild, really intense energy, extremely powerful for better and for worse, collectively and individually. Um, but here's a few points I want to make. Venus, who's Ishtar, who's Inanna, who's morning star, who's evening star, it's all the same deity, being presented or reflecting different facets of her divine power, right? She is the first deity that's written about relative to her being equated to the first deity of a love goddess and a war goddess, because that's exactly what she is. She's the love goddess Aphrodite, that is when she's an evening star, and she's the warrior goddess when she's a morning star, which is Pallas Athena. So it's the same divinity going through different processes and different journeys based on all these extraordinary stories that we read about her experience as a morning star, evening star, which is Pallas Athena, which is Aphrodite, which is then we have the transitional stages where she dies, goes into the underworld, and goes through 7 gates. Now, there's some interesting things about that journey. There's so many, actually, I wouldn't even know where to begin. But here's what I want to kind of focus on today. When she decides to visit her sister Ereshkigal in the underworld, it is said that she does herself up in a really big way. What I'm talking about is that she puts on this, exquisite makeup, really like black black mascara, black eyeliner. She really emphasizes her eyes. She wears these incredible jewels and jewelry, and she adorns herself with beautiful clothing. So she just really goes all out, okay? And she's actually visiting her sister in the underworld because her sister's husband died. So the sister is Ereshkigal is the queen of the underworld, all right? And she's in tremendous pain, okay? And Inanna or Ishtar or Venus decides to go and visit her to apparently console her in her tremendous grief, right? But all these other gods and deities, it is suggested that they believe that Venus or Ishtar or Inanna is going into the underworld actually to take it over, right? So she's got a hidden sort of agenda, if you like. So you see, there's all these complexities about Venus. So when she enters the underworld and Ereshkigal sees her looking so glamorous and so beautiful, she basically loses her. She flips her shit, right? And she just says, no, you're not coming into the underworld, into my kingdom, looking like that and dressed like that when I'm actually mourning and grieving here and dying with pain. So she decides to take everything off Venus, Inanna Ishtar, all her clothing, all her jewelry, and so forth. And that's part of the story of where she goes through 7 spheres. And in each sphere, she loses a particular garment, be it a piece of jewelry or a piece of clothing. And so by the time she gets to the end, to the bottom, Ereshkigal kills her. And that is said that when that act happens, that really puts an end to, in Babylonian tradition and teachings, that there were 3 earths actually, as opposed to one that we identify with, right? So it's just much more complicated. But it is said that when she was killed, there was such a big concern by all these divinities on I think it was on the upper layer of, there's 3 earths. The third one is actually what we call the underworld, which is the kingdom of Pluto, the kingdom of Ereshkigal, the kingdom of Persephone, all those Scorpio underworld deities and divinities. And before that, there is another earth where it's said that it's underneath it is all this fresh water. And in that second layer, there's all these magical spiritual divinities, which are higher than the underworld, darker divinities. And then there's the other earth where humans live and so forth. So it's pretty complicated. But when Inanna Ishtar was killed, it was feared that there would be no more fertility and love and sensuality and sexuality available, right? On the earth plane anymore because she was killed. We're talking about the goddess of fertility, love, sex, and so forth, right? And she was killed. So it goes without saying that then those aspects would not exist anymore. We would not have access to that anymore. So Venus, Ishtar, Inanna needed to be revived, and she was by the help. There are different stories. In some stories, it is said that these demons came and they helped revive her and helped take her back up to the upper world, as it were, in order for fertility and sexuality and so forth to continue, so that procreation could continue. And then there are other stories that say that there were these little counselor divinity type of helpers that came along and essentially rescued her and helped her get back up to the top, as it were, for us to experience the divine goddess of fertility and love and sexuality. But when she came back up, she also, there's so many complexities, so many layers, but there was one story where her lover, who in more modern astrology, if you like, but it is also existent in traditional ancient astrology, was Mars, right? That was like her main lover, although she was married to Hephaestus, who's Vulcan, right? Who was a blacksmith alchemist. Venus was married to him, but her greatest lover was Mars, right? Anyway, in Babylonian myth and tradition, she had a lover there as well. And it is said that when she died, he basically didn't really give a shit. He didn't blink an eye, you know. He just kind of sat there in his throne in this regal kind of attire. And when she descended up, because she descends down, but then, sorry, ascends up, she saw him, you know, just sitting there, kind of lapping it up, as it were, not really giving a shit about what had happened to her. So she takes full revenge on him, right? And there's another story which shows us another aspect of this divinity, Venus, Inanna Ishtar. There's many complexities to this goddess. She is the one that has fascinated me, has intrigued me, has taught me more about astrology than any other divinity has, hands down, right? So why is all this important? It's important because at the moment, Venus is an evening star. Now, in traditional, or not even traditional, but Babylonian astrology, which is where astrology, that's the mother of astrology is from Mesopotamia and Babylonia, right? In terms of recorded history. The evening star corresponds to Ishtar of Uruk. And that's Uruk is actually it was a city in Mesopotamia, okay, and that part of the world then was strictly associated with beauty, love, poetry, romance, art, you know, all the typical Aphrodite Venusian elements, right, of Venus. And that city was said to have all of that flourishing within it and around it all the time. The other city, and that's the Venus evening star. The other city was Ishtar, was called Ishtar of Akkad, right? And Akkad again is another city in Babylonia, and this city corresponds to war. Okay, this is where was a king called Sargon, who he was like an empire unto himself, and he overtook you know, so many spaces in that region, in Mesopotamia, you know, Samaria, you know, Syria, you know, all those regions. He conquered all these cities, right? And he became this king, and he did it with Ishtar, okay, which is Venus, which is the Venus morning star, which is the goddess of war, the goddess of victory in war, okay, which is Pallas Athena. So when we have a Venus evening star activated on the wheel, which we do at the moment, then we have these layers of the world of love is being filtered through or experienced through the evening star. Now, the evening star, there's so many things we could say about that, depending on which school of thought you want to go to. But some quick things from the Babylonian teachings, the evening star phase or journey is more, it is a much more sensitive realm. It is a realm of love and relationships. It is that deity is very much concerned about love and relationships and things like that, and is just way more sensitive and more easily swayed into love or relationships and things like that. And that's the zone we are in at the moment. So all relationships are being filtered through this part of Ishtar or Inanna or Venus. And because we've got all these back stories relating to astronomical phenomena of the position of the planets, i.e., Venus, Pluto, Mars conjunction, which started in February this year. And as we've progressed through, we're now getting all these parts of that cycle being shown to us, such as Mars being opposite Pluto, such as Venus being conjunct the south node, which corresponds to the solar eclipse. So there's all these little backstories that connect to the initial alignment from back in February. And they're like different chapters. That's one way you could look at them. They're like different chapters of what we began in February relative to Mars-Venus matters. And also at that time, we were in a morning star phase. So there was a lot of conflict, a lot of conflicting things going on, both in relationships and in the world, right? Because it was a Venus morning star that was activated in Leo, right? Which is her secondary exaltation, according to Babylonian astrology. So it's a real primal power position for Venus to be in Leo. And whether you've got that natally, that's a very powerful position for Venus, or whether it's your Venus morning star. So that triple conjunction with Venus, Mars, Pluto started while Venus was in a morning star. And then come June this year, she died. She went into the underworld. She was invisible for quite some time. And this is leading me to my final sort of point. She was invisible for quite some time. I think it was 3 months, which is the longer zone of her invisibility. And that is a time of death, mourning, loss, sadness, really not the best time to be starting new things in love and relationships and all that sort of stuff. That's Inanna, Ishtar, Venus descending into the underworld, dying. She must die to be reborn. So she was reborn in June as an evening star in Gemini, right? And so now we see her in the sky every evening, setting on the western horizon, shining with her beautiful, glorious, mystical feel and look about her, because an evening star Venus does even look very different to a morning star Venus. Morning star rises on the eastern horizon just before the sun. And evening star sets just after the sun sets, right? That's the difference between them. And so one is rising in the morning, very early, morning before the sun rises. So the sky looks very different just before the sun rises and just as the sun sets. We all know that, right? And so these are important details because they're astronomical phenomena that then really describe the differences in this one deity, this one divine deity, Venus, Inanna, Ishtar, who has so many different aspects and facets to her. And those differences basically describe her mode of operation when she's an evening star or when she's a morning star. So as I was saying before, as an evening star, there's much more sensitivity going on there with relationship matters. And there's she's much more susceptible and much more swayed in the heart and the world of love, right? But things can go that they're quite tricky in that phase as well. Even though she's the love Aphrodite Venus, that's her most natural position, if you like, from the point of view of her being a love goddess. She's at one with that. She's at one with that energy. But then there's other complexities like, well, when Venus first appeared, after she descended into the underworld and was reborn as an evening star in June, what sign did she appear in? Because her appearance, let me put it like this, her death happens when she disappears and she's nowhere to be seen. So she's doing this massive alchemical transformative death journey in the underworld. And then she forms a conjunction to the sun at some point, which is her rebirth, right? In this case, it was a conjunction to the sun as an evening star, meaning Venus was not retrograde. That's what an evening star is. It's when Venus forms a conjunction to the sun, but is not retrograde, okay? So she forms a conjunction to the sun, but she needs to start to separate from the sun before we can see her in the sky. And that happened, I think it was about a month after the actual conjunction. So when she does appear, what sign is she appearing in? She formed the conjunction in Gemini. Yes, that's the Gemini evening star. But what sign does she actually appear in a month later? That's very important, because if she appears in a sign as an evening star that corresponds to masculine energy, that wouldn't be particularly favorable. We'd want the evening star Venus to appear in a feminine sign. This is as per Babylonian teachings, okay? When she appears in a feminine sign, when she's in her evening star phase, it's just it makes the matters of love and relationships a lot easier. Let me just put it like that. If she appears in a masculine sign, then it's sort of incongruent with her nature, with her actual nature as an evening star, which is the love goddess. So what's going to happen? I've just forgotten. I think she appeared, because I look at both the tropical and the Babylonian, and I think in the Babylonian she appeared in Cancer actually, which is good because it's a feminine sign, right? But this to summarize now, I've given you some context of different complexities of Venus, right? Ishtar, Inanna. And I guess what I want to summarize and finish with is this. The Mars component forming a square to Chiron and an opposition to Pluto, over the next 2 months is part of what we're doing in our life with Venus as well, because of the triple conjunction they formed in February. Okay. And there's a lot of emotionality involved here in Mars. So if there's been complexities and difficulties and challenges and things going on, in your world of love and relationships, this Mars in Cancer is not going to make things any easier. It's going to be very, very challenging. But I guess the two good things about that would be Mars is going to be opposite Pluto, so it illuminates. It's going to show you, for better or for worse, what stage you've reached at now with the matters going on in your life, and you'll just have a clearer, more objective perspective. That's important. And the other good thing about that is that Mars and Pluto opposite each other also speaks to aligning our higher will with our lower will and having some integral alignment there going on consciously. So that's important as well. But as we move forward, what's going to happen is that the solar eclipse in Libra is going to come up, which I'm going to come back and speak to that separately, but it is part of all this story here as well. And let me just share my screen for a moment. So here's what I want to show you to begin with. So can you see the date there, March 22nd, 2025? Okay, that's the next Venus star point, all right? And that's going to occur on that date, which is at 2 degrees of Aries in tropical zodiac. And that will be the next Venus morning star. Now, the most incredible thing, which you'll never hear anybody else talking about except for Rumen Kolev, and there are a couple of other Babylonian astrologers who would be aware of this, and they may have mentioned it or they may have not. I don't know. But here I am mentioning it for you guys. So here's what's going to happen. Where's my chart? Okay. So see, this is the Babylonian chart. Okay. This is Rumen Kolev's program, which I have spoken about in other videos. Now, as I just let me just make this clear one more time. When Venus transitions from morning star to evening star, or from evening star to morning star, that transition means Venus disappears out of the sky. Number one. Number two, that then equates to her descending into the underworld and dying, and then ultimately being reborn. There's two passages where she does that. One's longer, one's shorter. When she goes through that death passage, she will reappear in the sky, if it's an evening star, she'll appear in the evening. If it's a morning star, she'll appear in the morning. When she appears, that will be in a particular sign, which will be significant. That will be at a particular time, which will be significant. And her appearance will vary based on your latitude as well. Okay. So just keep that in mind while I go to this next component. So here's the Babylonian chart, and here's the date for next year, okay, for the Venus morning star, which is the next star point that will be activated on the wheel, okay? And this is the one that will ultimately, this is the Aries star point. This is the one that will ultimately go back into Pisces, which is years and years and years away still, but that's going to be very hopeful for the future of the young ones, especially. And if we're still around, a lot of us will be. That's very hopeful because the Venus star point is leaving Scorpio and committing to Libra very soon in the next few years. That's a transition of 120 years. And then in about, I think it's by 20, it's still a while away. It's still over a decade away, okay? That is, this Sun-Venus conjunction in Aries, morning star, will eventually become a Pisces star point, which we really need because the Mars and Scorpio star points on the wheel they're both ruled by Mars. That is, Aries and Scorpio are both ruled by Mars. Mars is a malefic, okay? And so, you know, we've seen enough of anger and hatred and violence and conflict and war and, you know, all that, the darker, unconscious, malefic nature of Mars. That's going to shift. But anyway, getting back to the present moment, there's a Sun-Venus conjunction occurring in March next year. It's the next Venus star point. It will be a morning star. So as per Rumen's program, which is magical, by the way, this is Venus here, highlighted in blue. Okay, let me just grab a little. Is it this one? Yeah, that'll do. So, oops. Oh, no, that's not what we want. Just bear with me. There we go. There's Venus there. Okay, you'll see that. And that's the sun, by the way. So if you look at, well, actually, I have to stop that, otherwise that component doesn't work. Okay, so if I put my cursor over here onto the sun and draw that line. This is the ecliptic. That yellow circle is the ecliptic, which is the sun's pathway, right? Beams of the sun are pretty much here. So if you look to the left down the bottom, there's a little window, okay? Just down here, right down here, okay? See, it shows you the Ptolemaic position, which is tropical, okay, is about 3 degrees of Aries, okay? And the Babylonian position of this is about 7 degrees of Pisces, okay? So the conjunction occurs in different signs depending on which system you're looking at. Anyway, that's another thing altogether. And I look at both and I value both. And I think both are important to look at, both systems, 100% hands down. No two ways about it, right? Now, here's what I want to show you. If I animate this chart, which I will, and I just click over one day at a time, let's just do that. 23rd of March. Look, I'll do it quite fast just to get to my point. Let's see, where's that taking it to? 2nd of April. Okay. Now, what if I showed you every single day from the 22nd of March to the 2nd of April, what's going to happen, which is freaking amazing, and this does not occur often. So understand the sheer magnitude and importance of this fact that I'm about to share with you, which I will come back to talk about in depth at a later time. What happens in this round of the transition of Venus is evening star, 22nd of March, 2025, she's reborn as a morning star, Aries morning star. Before that rebirth occurs, she's got to die and go into the underworld. Now, what's going to happen is she is not going to be invisible. She will not be invisible in 2025. That's a big omen. And it's actually good in I don't like to use the word good, but it's a real opportunity for us, okay? But it does fast track and it does intensify things as well. Things happen very, very, very quickly because Venus not disappearing, that means that she's not going to descend into the underworld. So she's going to remain visible. So we're not going to have that opportunity to go into that underworld process, which is an opportunity, but it is a pretty daunting experience for most people. Still, it's an opportunity, but it's daunting. We're not going to go through that next year with the Sun-Venus conjunction because she's not going to disappear. And that in Babylonian teachings to some extent, or actually not to some extent, to a full extent, really corresponds to things moving and changing very, very quickly. And we will notice this, we will see this, we will experience it, we will feel it, we will see it in the world, we will see it in our lives, we'll see it in our relationships. And this is Venus morning star, so it's the warrior goddess. Things are going to happen very, very quickly next year, much quicker than they have this year. That's what I really wanted to highlight to you without going to more detail about that right now. I needed to explain the background in the way that I have so that you can understand why this phenomena is so important for the world and for us. As I said, I will come back to speak to that in much more depth. But for the moment, we can have that in our mind, understand the sheer significance of it, and also going back to tropical zodiac. This is a chart for today. So there's Mars in Cancer, which in about a month's time will form a square to Chiron. Okay, which is not an easy passage. Let's just be realistic. By that stage, the sun will be in Libra, and it will be at a degree where it will be opposite Chiron, and Mars will be squaring the sun in Chiron. It's only there for a few days, but it'll be important because of what started in February. Mars, Pluto, Venus, all conjunct. By the end of Mars's journey in Cancer, which I think is around the 5th of November, Mars will be 29. I'll show you. Just change that to days. So let's just get Mars to... Okay, so here's where the T-square happens. Look at that. Mars is 21, the Sun is 21, Chiron's 21. Bang, T-square activated. That's an important passage. Then by go just here. Look at that. Mars is 29 Cancer, Pluto is 29 Capricorn. This is huge. Again, not easy, as I've mentioned, but oppositions are brilliant for clear awareness, objectivity, needing to see what you need to see. And what are you going to see? You're going to see a lot of emotional, unconscious activations that come up, which can be a bit daunting or can be a bit troublesome, but hey, it's also an opportunity to actually see things more clearly. That's the beauty of the opposition. And there is something, so primary, completing, right? From the point of view of Mars Cancer, Mars Pluto in Cancer Capricorn. And what's that, November? Oh, before this happens, we've got a solar eclipse, in Libra, which I'm going to come back to speak to. So what I hopefully explained today shows you, even if you don't understand all the details of everything, because it is Venus, Ishtar, Inanna, morning star, evening star, is the most complex body of work of a divinity that you can ever study, in my opinion, from what I know thus far. I might come across something else in years ahead where I may have a similar view or whatever, but I highly doubt it. But you never know, never say never. If you can take away from this just a couple of things, that is that this year and next year are such significant portals for our evolution and consciousness and clearing old habits, old pathways, old karma, old whatever out of our life because we have grown and evolved. That cannot happen easily. We've got to face all the crap in the underworld. That's the stuff in our own unconscious. So it does take a lot of consciousness and awareness and observation and detachment and reflection and introspection to watch ourselves really honestly, because that's what this is all about. And because 2024 has got so many crucial activations relative to relationship themes from all the eclipses and from the Venus-Pluto-Mars conjunction and from Venus's evening star, which is relationships, the love goddess. And then, come March next year, where she is reborn as a morning star, she does not go invisible. Things are going to move very fast. So this is a time to really be preparing ourselves for all of this, and also just being really honest and really integral with just feeling like we are doing the best and we are doing what is right for us, for our soul, because you know what's right for your soul. You can feel it. Everybody can. Even people who have created all these blockages and walls and whatever, there's something in us, the spirit, the soul, you can't silence that. So I'll see you guys very soon with more. Still feeling sick, actually, to be honest. But all the astrology reflects it in my own chart. It's been a tough year. I would have to say, actually, this is how far I'd go. The year that my father transitioned to the other side, well, 2024 is not like that year, but it kind of comes relatively close in certain ways. And that's a big statement for me to say that, because that 2017 was the year where my dad left and where I thought I was going to leave as well, you know. So I don't make these statements lightly. I guess I'm just trying to share with you guys just how difficult it's been this year. And I'm only sharing that not because I want your sympathy, I don't, but to show you that I can empathize with you, with your own hardships and everything that you are going through. Number one, because I'm an extremely empathetic person. And number two, because 2024 has been the year from hell for me and many others. But we're still here. And like someone said, if you're going through hell, keep going. Just keep going. The spirit, the soul is resilient. Never can it be silenced, and never can it be terminated. It only changes in form. It's indestructible. Immutable consciousness is what Jeffrey Wolf Green calls it. I love that description. So just keep going to your best capability. That's all we can do, our best, right? See you soon. Oh, and by the way, I do have 2 complete courses available. Reach out if you're interested in those. I'm about to construct my 3rd course, which will be more advanced material. If you want to know more about that or any of my other courses or any readings, just send me an email. And if you do send me an email and it's been over a week that I haven't replied to you, please resend it. I sometimes forget to look at my spam folder, and a lot of mail goes there. And sometimes I might just be sick for a week and I can't email, instantly. So please understand, I'm working here on my own. I don't have help. I don't have support. I don't have a partner. I don't have a little admin person. I'm doing everything on my own. And while I've been sick pretty much all year as well. I know you all can appreciate that. Sending you all much love, and see you soon.